You've hit play on the Screen Companion, where we'll help you pick something for movie night. From Russia with Love features British man of mystery, spy extraordinaire, James Bond, caught in a web of deceit as he accompanies a Soviet cipher clerk from Istanbul back across the Iron Curtain. The prize? For Bond and MI6, it's a code machine to let them in on Soviet communications. For Spectre, an international terrorist organization responsible for setting the trip into motion, it's an opportunity to kill Bond and cause a scandal in the Western intelligence community. And From Russia with Love, that came out in 1963, a large portion of it sees Bond in Istanbul, Turkey, a place my dad's been to a few times, once as a civilian and another time as a member of the armed services. When were they and where in the country?
I was in Ankara, the capital, from 1967 through 69 or 70, and I was there as an Air Force dependent under my father. He was stationed there. And then I went back to Istanbul in 1982 until 1983. I was maybe 20-odd miles outside of Istanbul.
As we were watching the movie, you pointed out that a lot of the sites that are there in the film, the locations they went to, you had actually been to yourself. What would you say was the most impressive site when you were in Istanbul?
The Blue Mosque was most impressive, and I think it's called the Galata Bridge, but that's fairly new. It's like a mini version of the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, so that's another high point.
What comes to mind when you think of the Turks back then?
They were slow to change. I think their politics, they're very conservative people. When I went back in 82, I noticed at the time that it didn't seem like their clothes had changed, the way they wear heavier clothing than Westerners would, like in Germany or here, when it's relatively warm. So that hadn't changed. I could smell the Turkish tobacco all over the place too. And basic style, fashion, hadn't seemed to change much in 13 years.
The ancient feeling of parts of Turkey, did that really impress you when you were there? Did you feel it?
Sure. I'd gone on quite a few visits to Istanbul, the city area, and along the Bosporus. And then I've been to eastern Turkey, Erzurum, far out in the east, not too far from what was then the Soviet Union and the Armenian and Azerbaijani Soviet republics. Sure, there's a lot of Roman ruins and Ottoman Turkish ruins from their empire. Just about anywhere you go in Turkey.
And you traveled by train. When we were watching the movie, you said it looked just like the train that Bond and Tatiana get aboard.
Yeah, there's approximately a 20-year difference between the movie time, I think, and when I was there riding the trains in 82, 83. And I swear the train cars look the same. I mean, the actual same train cars, not just the paint scheme. And they looked worn back then, too. Very conservative.
When you were a kid over there, did Grammy and Grandpa give you free rein? Or was anyone with you whenever you were out on the streets?
All of us, except for my youngest sister, could go out, get on the buses, basically free rein.
They didn't say, like, stay within a couple miles, or...
No.
If you were going to take a bus ride somewhere, would you say, hey, Dad, I'll be over here at noon and I'll be back at this time?
No. He was doing his job in the Air Force. We probably told my mother that we're going to go on, catch the bus and go to base today or Ankara Air Station. Usually we would ride the U.S. Air Force sponsored buses. They had a good range of service around Ankara back then, which has totally exploded. If you look at it on the map, it's totally different now. Where the base used to be was it was a very barren area to the west of the city. And now it's engulfed by the city and beyond going west. It's just, city is built up and just swallowed it up.
Ah, my friend, come in, come in. Glad to see you. Welcome to Istanbul.
Well, thank you for sending the car, but it does rather tie you in with me.
You're in the Balkans now, Mr. Bond. The game with the Russians is played a little differently here. The day-to-day routine matters. We don't make it too difficult to keep a tab on each other.
So I gathered from your chauffeur. He's a rather intelligent young man, by the way.
He should be. He's my son. Coffee?
Medium sweet.
2 medium sweet. He also is my son. All of my key employees are my sons. Blood is the best security in this business.
You must have quite an establishment here.
Biggest family payroll in Turkey. Not bad for a man who started life breaking chains and bending bars with his teeth in a circus. But let's talk about this business of yours.
Well, Em thinks I'm wasting my time here.
And so do I. Something smells.
Maybe. But if there's a chance of getting a lector. Now, you tell me, where can I contact this girl?
She said she would make her own arrangements. You'll just have to wait. My friend, if you really want my advice, you should spend a few pleasant days with us here in Istanbul, and then go home.
I'm curious, with how much day tripping it sounds like you guys were doing on your own, walking around. Did you have a bicycle over there?
No.
Okay, but still, you're using public transpo or base transportation as well. What kind of ID were you carrying as a 9-10-year-old kid?
No ID.
So how did you get on base?
As a dependent, you had to be at least 10 years old to get an identification card. That was the cutoff date when you could apply. And I wasn't 10 yet. So that was part of the big deal of when we left Turkey and went to Florida, Eglin Air Force Base, and I turned 10, I was pestering my father to get me an ID card next time we go on base, because they would routinely go to the commissary to shop. And he put it off. I never got my ID card. That seemed like a big rite of passage if you were an Air Force brat. You had your own card, your own ID card.
When you came back to the States after Turkey, how much longer was Grandpa in the Air Force?
Maybe a year and a half. I think that's why he just didn't care about it, because he was retiring, 20 years service, and what's the point of putting in the time and effort, probably, and filling out the paperwork, which wasn't that much paperwork. Apparently it was too much for him to take an interest in.
But your older siblings, they had IDs?
Yes, I'm not sure if your Aunt Gloria had one, but I know Dan and John both had them, but they were a few years older.
As an Air Force brat, did you like being overseas, or were you always waiting to get back to the States?
Being overseas, I was in Korea as a kid. I don't remember any of that because I was too young. But Turkey, I don't recall being bored. We could go out and hang out with other GI kids in our neighborhood, and we didn't have television. We had Turkish TV that was on maybe once every couple days in the late afternoon for their evening news, and then that was it. Being overseas, I did miss the original Star Trek when it was first run, and Gilligan's Island and other stuff, but I saw all that later anyway in reruns.
So having the run of the town as you did as a boy back then, do you recall having any reservations about Ankara? Were you ever afraid, or were you just happy, jolly, not really paying attention to maybe some of the criminal elements of the city, or being dangerous for a kid your age?
Well, back then, some of the dependents, The older kids would get involved in black marketing, purchasing stuff on base that's a privilege for the military dependents, and they would in turn sell U.S.-made products to Turks or distributors, and they would sell it on. But they would make a profit out of that. So there was that little thing going on with dependent kids.
But at the time, were you actually cognizant of that? Did that paint a picture for you? Did it color your going outside? Like maybe you'll hesitate to go out or say, oh, I need a few friends with me?
No, other than there was a time when my oldest brother was involved in some shenanigans, I'd say, and this Turkish cab driver, he was running a black market operation, apparently, amongst other cabbies. He felt wronged by my brother, so he was keeping an eye out for my brother to get his hands on him. And from what I found out years later, talking with one of my brothers, that cabbie had a reputation as being very rough with people that ripped him off, very physical. So it didn't pay to piss him off. Once we heard about this cabbie's intention of getting back at my brother, every time we'd see him from a distance coming up our hill or coming down from the top of the hill in his distinctive cab, we would yell out his name and we'd all jump behind something.
Like you saw the boogeyman, making fun of it.
Yeah, this goes out to those, maybe some dependent kids from that time frame in Ankara would recall his moniker was Crazy Jackson. And his taxi was one of those elongated type 50s vehicles, kind of beat up, and it was flat colored as I recall. Green top and a pink, believe it or not, pink main body.
Become an active listener by joining the Screen Companion. Subscribe on YouTube, hit us up on X, and our Facebook group. Let us know your favorite episodes and what topics or films we should tackle next. Further support the host by buying his novel, Self-Recognition, a futuristic detective story, available on Amazon in print and digital formats. Now, back to the show. How's Turkish food?
I didn't get much Turkish food when I was there as a kid. The bread rings, which they still have, called a smite. There'd be these men that would walk around with a serving tray, a disc-shaped item on their head, and with a cushion under it so it's comfortable for their head. And they would walk around the city yelling smite, smite. And people would go up and say, I'll take two. And he'd take that off of his head, set it to the side or down, and take off whatever you ordered and take the money. Very cheap by American standards. The drawback on that is it wasn't unusual to see those vendors drop all their product on the ground, on the street. And back then it was very common in Ankara to have horses and carts still with their droppings on the roads, etc. So we changed our eating habits in that and got a different snack. But they do sell those in bakeries too, back then even, for people that wanted something they could feel safe with.
Were smites more like bagels or donuts?
If I had to pick one or the other, I guess it would be a kind of a bagel, but not as dense. And I'd say maybe an inch or so in diameter and just a circle with sesame seeds baked into it and no other spices.
Do you remember what would normally be eaten with it as a condiment?
To my knowledge, it was just that. It was just the bread.
Oh.
You just snack on it. It's a snack.
Was it pretty mild or salty or?
No. When I was there in 82, 83, I got a chance, naturally, since I was an adult, to go into Istanbul on my own, visit restaurants and roadside vendors for more chances of having a local food. Turkish food is good. It's very good.
I've heard Stuart Copeland, drummer for the Police, say that when you grow up as an American overseas, like he did and you did, you get a deeper appreciation for your homeland of being an American citizen. Do you think any of your time living abroad as a boy has colored your outlook as an adult?
It is true. I had that sense, and I think just about everybody else did too. The dependents, the service members. It seemed to me, being overseas, and even then in the 60s, there was a lot of strife in America at the time, racial strife. It seemed to me overseas, it didn't matter what color you were, what ethnicity, if you were an American, and especially a dependent of the military stationed over there, that it was a close-knit community, and you looked out for each other. I think if somebody needed help and you knew they were an American, that you'd help them out much more likely than not, even as an adult. When you're overseas, you were overseas. You were cut off from America. You could make phone calls. When I was in the Army, we were allowed, I think, one phone call a month, I believe, and it went through a telephone in the radio hookup, and then from radio was a military program called the Mars system. And then from the radio, it would be transmitted as a radio signal to the States, and then it would be reverse engineered from radio to the phone line of who you were talking to. And anytime you spoke, you'd have to say blah, 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 over, and then the other person would have to use radio techniques. But yeah, you couldn't just get American TV on your smartphone back then. If you called home on a landline, a regular phone line, it would be copious amounts of money, because back then it was long distance charges. And even just in the States, if you called from one state to a neighboring state, it would cost more than just a regular call. Whereas now you can call California to Virginia and it doesn't cost you anything extra. It's cheap. Back then you didn't waste all that money on phone calls, so you were really truly cut off. And that's when snail mail was the only mail. So you wrote letters home if you wanted to do extensive communication. That's pen on paper, folks. Put down everything you want to talk about on there, and then you wait for maybe a month to get a response.
So the movie for this episode, they really follow the book in the movie, Ian Fleming's original novel with the same title. And in the book, as so in the movie, there's a sequence at a gypsy camp. And Bond is there with the station chief of that area. And they're watching a couple of hotties catfight. It's a gypsy camp. Do you remember seeing any gypsy activity or being told to watch out for gypsies or heard from the locals stuff about gypsies, or did you see a gypsy cat fight?
No. I don't remember anything about gypsies in Turkey. Never heard anything about them.
So we were supping the other night, and the conversation that led to this question that I'm going to ask, we were talking about Playboy magazine and how the joke of them being, I just look at Playboy to read the articles, snicker, snicker. But in fact, especially 60s, 70s, they had a lot of articles. And then you said it reminded you of a chaplain, I think, when you were stationed in Turkey.
Okay, I'll say that this person was the chaplain's assistant for the army site that I was located at outside of Istanbul. And he lived on what we call the economy in the military, which is to say local housing off base. So he lived away from our site and actually in the city, a suburb of Istanbul. And the way I remember the story, because I did the message from the command to higher headquarters reporting what happened, he claimed to the commander that he was laying on his bed and he had his windows open, and they seemed like large windows, but they opened up. And apparently some Turkish women walked by and saw him abusing himself, allegedly. And in the message, actually, it wasn't Playboy, but he claimed he was reading Texas Monthly because he was a proud Texan. And he would just happen to be laying on his bed with Texas Monthly. I mean, why would somebody complain to the Turkish police about something like that unless there was something else going on? To my knowledge, nothing else happened about that. It was just embarrassing, and then it went away.
Going into your Bond history, your relationship with the franchise, is it true that the first one you actually saw at a theater was with me watching GoldenEye in '95?
I would say, I'd feel safe saying that yes. Because as a kid, we didn't get out to the movie theaters.
Were you even aware of Bond in the 60s or 70s?
I wasn't. I was a kid, under 10.
But I mean, once you even came back to the States, and it's the 70s, did you know about Roger Moore?
Not in the early 70s. When the old man retired in 71, we moved to the Northeast, and I became aware of Bond after that sometime when they would have new movies come out and they'd advertise them on TV. But actually going to see one, no. I don't recall seeing a Bond movie before that.
Supposing in this hypothetical that you're walking around and you happen to find $5 and you go, I'm going to go see a movie. You were never like chomping at the bit, curious about what Bond movies were like?
No, not then. And then once I joined the service in 78, quite a bit of my time, over half of my time, 14 years, I was overseas. I did go to some movies overseas on post, but I wasn't a movie guy like seeing what's on this week. I was young in the service, and quite often young people in the service at the time would spend time at their favorite bar. What's going on downtown tonight,
Sean Connery, he's the first of 6 in the Eon-produced movies to play Bond. Based on From Russia with Love, do you think he's in the upper, middle, or bottom tier?
He's in the upper. I think his physical fitness relative to some of the others, and his youth, which would speak to his abilities to fight the enemy agents if he needs to.
Fighting Red Grant in that famous train fight scene, what was your overall impression of that?
While I was watching, I was thinking, he had Red Grant by the head. I don't know why he just didn't suddenly pull up and snap his neck, but, I understand they got to keep it going for the whatever requisite time frame the director wanted. Yeah, the fight scene was, I thought, sloppy, because they just kept falling on the drugged woman that was sleeping off the drug that Red gave her earlier, and then back over to the other side of the cabin, and then back. They didn't look like seasoned pros. Very novice.
And I hear a lot of people, when they talk about that scene as being one of the standout moments, they talk about the energy of it, because when we look back at the Bond movies of the 60s, we don't think of a lot of brutality in the fight scenes or any extended choreography. It's usually just a chop to the neck, somebody goes down, and there were a few moments of that in this.
Yeah.
And I agree with that sentiment, but what you said just now, I don't think people swing to that thought and make it a full picture, because they don't feel like professionals, and when they talk about how much Red Grant has been trained by Spectre and how he's such a badass, it is hard to believe that. They can't even use any MMA moves or nothing like that in their fight.
Well, you need space to do that stuff, and I've been told that before, that discussing it with other people about martial arts. I tended to agree with them that you do need space to do that, and they didn't really have space.
You can grapple.
Yeah, but they were more like just a couple of Joes on the street. They're just a couple office workers that are drunk, and they get in an argument and start pushing at each other and fighting like that. They just went back and forth and
arguing over cab fare.
At least they didn't start swinging their hands at each other like windmills.
Out of all the Bond movies, this might be the most grounded Bond movie because it's Bond trying to get a cipher machine. There are no incredible villain lairs.
Sit down, number 3, while we listen to what number 5 has devised for us.
I hope Cranston's efforts as director of planning will continue to be as successful as his chess.
They will be. According to your instructions, I've planned for Spectre to steal from the Russians their new lector-decoding machine. For this, we need the services of a female member of the Russian cryptograph section in Turkey and the help of the British Secret Service. Naturally, neither the Russians nor the British will be aware that they are now working for us.
Number 3, is your section ready to carry out Kronstein's directives?
Yes, number 1. The operation will be organized according to Kronstein's plan. I have selected a suitable girl from the Russian consulate in Istanbul. She's capable, cooperative, and her loyalty to the state is beyond question.
And you're absolutely sure she believes you're still head of operations for Soviet intelligence?
It is most unlikely she would know I'm now working for Spectre. Moscow has kept my defection secret from everyone but a few members of the Presidium.
For your sake, I hope so.
Yes, Blofeld has his kitty in his lap, but besides that, he's not dumping people into shark pools with laser beams attached to their heads.
Right.
No volcanoes, no underwater bases, nothing like that. Not that some of the plot points are silly in this, because there usually is in a Bond movie, but the major beats, the overall plotting of it, half the movie takes place in Istanbul, and you see them going underground and looking through at the other side's office meetings, and it feels very spy-ish, and
Yeah.
and I see it being boring for some viewers, but I like that aspect of it. I don't mind it. I do appreciate some of the sillier Bond movies, but I think the grounded ones more. Other examples for people out there that want grounded Bond and don't believe that there can be a more realistic take. For Your Eyes Only, that Roger Moore movie, is really just a rehash of this. It's also about a cipher machine. And then Living Daylights. Both of Dalton's movies are about drugs. Can't get more realistic than that. Nobody's trying to take over the world in those movies. Did you notice in the opening, one of the Spectre agents, he's at a chess match, and then he gets a little message in his cup. Somebody presents him with a drink. And there's a message. Something like, report in, we need to talk, whatever. But did you notice the little insignia, the Spectre octopus, the logo?
Yeah, I believe so, yeah.
Because, as I mentioned, all these Bond movies can never be too serious. How stupid is it for a secret organization to have logos and branding? Because you want them to have deniability and say, I don't know what you're talking about.
And then who else is going to give him a note in the bottom of his cup?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, it was stupid.
This isn't the first time you've seen From Russia with Love, but after this most recent viewing, what ultimately stood out to you about revisiting Sean Connery's Bond? Besides him being a massive slut.
Yeah. I mean, you've brought it up before. The misogyny and the way he generally treats women. Now when I watch it, I do take note of that. Not that I'm a big fighter for female rights or something, but just I do notice that more, how he treats them. And it really does talk down to him. And James Bond isn't perfect. He's a good agent, but maybe he's a rotten person. Who knows? You don't really see much of the person James Bond, if you think about it.
We saw him swatting ladies on the butt when he thinks Tatiana, the woman that's going to give him the cipher machine, and they're traveling together, and he's not sure if she's his ally or actually springing a trap on him. There's a moment where he thinks that she is his enemy, and he wants to interrogate her, and he slaps her.
Well, I suppose if it's an interrogation technique, basically, because we were taught, they call it the OODA loop. When you just smack somebody, you need to follow it up with some good punches and stuff. But you do that slap, a really hard slap, just to interrupt their thought process about what they're planning on doing in that moment. You just smack them real hard and it just throws them, OODA loop. And maybe that was his point in that, not to be a bastard, but just to, it's an interrogation technique, man or woman. Maybe he would have done the same thing with the person that was across from him. I'd like to think that. Maybe he was just trying to get her to stop her BSing and take a moment.
Well, what really struck me on this watch is Colonel Klebb, the woman that worked for Soviet intelligence and then switched sides, went to work for Spectre. But very few people know that she defected, which is how she got Tatiana, a low-level
cipher clerk,
yeah, to get her in on this scheme that Tatiana thinks is for Mother Russia, but is actually for Spectre. It caught me how, for all of its faults, a pretty good scene with Red Grant and Bond fighting, and Grant's following Bond through most of the movie, looking out for him because he needs him to stay alive up to a certain point. I love that in this one we get clear reasons why Bond seems to be evading death as much as he is. Well, he's got Red Grant as his guardian angel. When you question why is Tatiana so head over heels for him, at least in the beginning, you know it's because she's been told she needs to be the honey trap. You want to be with Bond. And then whether or not later on she really does get to like him, you could argue it. But early on when she's sidling up to him, it's because they tell her, Klebb tells her, you need to get with Bond.
Well, they followed it up like they do with just about 99.9% of the interactions between Bond and women. They may be suspect at first, but once they have a taste of Bond, they love him. They'll do anything for him. Forget about the homeland, because he's that good.
We better get dressed now.
Why?
It's almost 6.
So?
Well, it's tea time.
We'll have it in here. We'll have all our meals here.
Yes, that will be splendid. But I've arranged to meet Karam in the restaurant car.
You go alone. I will stay here.
My dear Mrs. Somerset, now listen. Just do as I say, will you?
Yes, James. But there are some English customs that are going to be changed.
But of course, darling.
And that chess master that was working for Spectre, he claims to be so smart, but he doesn't tabulate that into his plot that Bond is a seducer of women. But I like those aspects of the plot that there's an explanation for some of the tropes. But after we go from that culmination of Grant following Bond, stalking him, thinking he's going to prey on him eventually. But that's not the ultimate climax of the movie. It goes on for like another 20-30 minutes, and we get another fight to wrap it up between Bond, Klebb, pretending to be a maid, with a blade on her shoe, and she looks like she could be 50. It's a goofy fight.
Yeah, you laughed at that point.
Do you really feel the danger? And she's like doing little kicks at him, but she doesn't have long legs, so what's she expect to do?
I wouldn't say she's squealing, but she's making noises every time she lifts her leg up to try to kick him. It wasn't very becoming of a Soviet intelligence colonel.
The one saving grace of that scene, maybe the only reason they had it besides that Klebb was still alive and you needed to dispatch her before the end of the film, but that there's a pivotal moment that shows you that Tatiana is on Bond's side and he doesn't have to worry about her being a double, triple agent, whatever the case, because she interrupts Klebb with her pistol so she can't get a shot off at Bond. But I think there could have been a better way to do that. I don't really need Klebb to die at Bond's hands, did you?
Every little bit helps, but I didn't really think about it.
That would be a great continuation of an earlier scene where Blofeld kills the chess master for failing in his scheme. Have the climactic battle with Red Grant. You could have Tatiana wake from her drug stupor long enough to help Bond, and it serves the same purpose of letting us and him know that, oh, okay, she's picked her side, she's with us, cool, so that he can really trust her and help her through the rest of the movie. And then instead of having Klebb pretend to be a maid with the little stupid shoe blade, have a coda where Blofeld's like, well, you thought you were going to die when I ultimately killed the Grand Master for failing me, but I told you what we do to people that fail. And then have Blofeld push a button and she goes into a tank full of sharks with laser beams attached to their heads.
The old tank full of sharks.
That would have been good.
Yeah, that would have been a good ending for her. The Bond series obviously isn't a superhero thing, but I think that would be his superpower, is seducing women and they just turn totally stupid and do everything he wants. He must be really good. Or they're very lonely.
Who do you think, out of all the Bonds, was the most charming?
I told you before that I like Roger Moore, but I've heard a lot of negative comment, not just from you, but other people, his Bond.
But Roger Moore, and by extension his Bond, that's the type of seduction where you meet a retired guy on the Love Boat and you have a little tryst. It's not a very powerful, manly version of wooing a woman.
Isn't that ageist? Are you being ageist?
Well, it's a fact. He was the oldest Bond.
I don't know. Maybe he was just the way he spoke and everything, and the way he dressed. It seemed like a higher level of refined, maybe. Yeah.
Can we agree that Daniel Craig was not close to being the best at that?
No, he wasn't. No.
They certainly shoehorned it into his movies. But without it being written in the script that he seduces a woman, his whole mannerism in that just never felt to me like something that would instantly get women into bed.
And that with his scrunched up, crinkled up lips when he was being intense, you know. Kind of like a USC fighter in that suit.
He was maybe the best at portraying the cruelness of Bond. Like whenever Bond needed to compartmentalize and just be a hitman and do his thing, don't think about killing people as a moral thing, you just got to do it for the mission.
Yeah.
He always worked in that capacity.
I think he got his hands dirtier.
Yeah, I think he killed a lot more people in any single movie, yeah.
But maybe, well, that has a lot to do with society in general, I think. The changes in society where it's more allowed to be like that in a movie, Bond. With this movie we watched, the fight scene on the train, uncoordinated brawling. Yeah, they had action, but it wasn't good action. Whereas Daniel Craig adds a lot of good fight scenes, running and jumping, you know, all that stuff that Tom Cruise does too.
You've reached the end of this episode of The Screen Companion. Thank you for listening.